Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In this call, we're joined by Aaron Black from O'Reilly, and we're going to talk all about publishing technical books, the process, what makes a noteworthy idea, and how, if you're interested, you can also get involved working with a really credible publisher like O'Reilly. Aaron, real pleasure to have you join us and give up some of your time. Me and Aaron have been working together on and off with O'Reilly over the last sort of 2 years, Aaron, I think it's been. And the process has been really good, and I can definitely see why O'Reilly has a good name in the market as well. So really appreciate your time, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate being asked to be on here and speak with you and a topic that I know well and I'm happy to talk about. I'm
Awesome.
excited.
I think lots of people are going to get quite a bit of value from this because it's not something that's spoken about that often. Just generally in the book publishing industry, I think it's a bit opaque to a number of people, and hopefully we can shed some light on the process, and that kind of thing. But how about we just start, Aaron, with your kind of your role that you play at O'Reilly, and what's your main kind of objective, or the role that you play in it there,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I am what in the industry is called an acquisitions editor. That's a fairly industry specific term that you'll find in nonfiction publishing generally. And what that really translates to is like a content strategist. So my role is to um, start with everything from market analysis to proposal to then helping the book or report or whatever we're working on together along, making sure that it meets its milestones, is coming together, and then on the back end of that, that everything's in line for production and we have something come out and it's well placed in the market. And then I also assist with some of the marketing and sales as well to like really make sure that that whole life cycle completes. And then hopefully, if it's successful, I'm the one you come back to and you say, hey, that worked great once. Let's do it again with a new idea or a second edition or something like that.
And that's great. I mean, it must be great, and you must get a lot of satisfaction from finding an author, especially an unpublished one, and kind of taking them through that entire process right the way through to kind of seeing the finished product, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's one of the most rewarding pieces of my job is taking people that have this great potential and then leading them through the process to the point where they become mentors themselves. One of my biggest success stories came from 2018. I had an author who wrote a best-selling book. It wound up becoming a bestseller on Amazon. Unity 2D game programming. Jared Halpern is the author's name. And when I was talking to him about that book after it had become a bestseller, I mentioned that I had been an editor on Windows Game Programming Guru, a book that had come out in 1999, so almost 20 years before.
Wow.
And Jared said, "Oh, I read that book. That's like one of the first books that taught me game
There
programming."
you go.
Yeah, so that was a really cool cycle to be, know that I had made one book and that book had not only got that author going, but then 20 years later got a whole different author going in the industry. So it's just such a neat cyclical thing of bringing new mentors up and new voices, and then those becoming, the stalwarts that influence new generations. I
Yeah, that's
love doing that.
awesome. Yeah, that ripple effect, right? Especially when you see it firsthand, like yourself, and have that privilege is so good. So,
It is.
just tell me now, how do you find people, like certainly tech professionals, as far as O'Reilly's concerned in the market? You found me in terms of my story as well. I didn't kind of seek you out. I didn't necessarily have even an idea at the time to kind of publish any kind of book. But I'd love to know the process of like how you find people and how that works in practical terms.
Absolutely. So there's kind of three big areas that I feel like work for me, and I think generally work for acquisitions editors. As I said, I've been in this since 1999, and I've been an acquisitions editor since 2008. So I should qualify that I've done this for a
I
while.
think so.
Um, yeah, and currently one of the biggest tools for the last chunk of time has been LinkedIn. That's one that we go to time and again, just looking for people with the qualifications. And that's just a piece of the puzzle, but I would say that's one of the big ones is professional networks. So LinkedIn, or maybe it's an industry network, something that you're a Databricks MVP or something like that. going to somebody that is within some kind of network and saying, okay, you have the credentials. That's generally only one piece, though, because understanding how to create a data pipeline for generative AI is one thing. Explaining it to somebody else is a different
Hmm.
thing.
Quite different.
And those, yes, quite different. And finding somebody with both skills is a unique challenge. So that's one half. The second half is looking at like articles. So Medium or industry publications towards data science, things like that. My own field right now is mostly focused on data, so which speaks well to your audience, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so looking at things that are focused within the industry and finding articles and then finding those authors who are writing and competently teaching people about these topics. That's kind of the next big piece, and then that kind of are the two rungs there of having industry experts, great industry writers, and sometimes those are the same people, sometimes they're not. And hopefully they are, and that's great. Then I have one author and I can say, hey, you write wonderfully about data mesh, let's do a book.
Yeah.
And they know about it and they write about it. Sometimes that's two different people, and I get asked a lot about that. So kind of inserting this idea, I get asked a lot of, well, I know a lot about this technology, but I'm not a great writer, or I'm a great writer and I kind of understand this, but I really need somebody in depth to help me. And when that happens, I really recommend that the writer figure out how to solve it some. I
Mm.
can help, but I'm kind of throwing that out there that if you identify as one or the other, if you say, hey, I'm a great writer, but I don't completely understand this, or I really understand this, but I don't know how to explain it. Finding each other is a good
Yeah.
idea, and then come to me, and say, hey, we found each other and we're working together on this, or do a podcast or something, and start working together. So those are the two things. And then the third one are industry conferences and events, things like that. So I often will go to things like I was just at the Databricks Data and AI Summit not that long ago. And I'll hit the talks, see what's being talked about, and that helps with ideas for one. That helps me understand,
Sure.
what is going on within the zeitgeist of this topic area. But then it also helps find talent, because then I can find people that are passionate about this, that are speaking about it, that already know how to codify their ideas and walk someone through from point A in a speaking engagement to point Z, or Z if you're non-American, and yeah. So I mean that's another really key area that I look at is who's actively talking and speaking and going to events in the topic area, and I would say those are probably the three biggest ways I find people.
Okay, great. And you mentioned a kind of example there where some people come to you with an idea, that was the one where they needed to partner with somebody either who's good at writing or more technical than they are. I'm also right though in thinking O'Reilly has ideas. And you mentioned you go to the conferences, you understand where there's traction and interest and engagement in the market. You have an idea and then you search for people in the field. So does it work both ways? Is it a two-way street in terms of an ideas? And how, if somebody brings you an idea, do you validate if that's a book worthy idea?
Absolutely, yes. So it is a two-way street. I sometimes will come up with an idea, or maybe like an O'Reilly think tank will come up with an idea and put me on it, and then I'll go out and look. But it's very common for people to already have this and then come to us and say, "Hey, I'm working on this new way of seeing data, and I'm calling it data unity, and I'm really trying to push it, and I've been going to conferences and speaking on it, and I want you guys to publish on it." And the real thing with that is, first off, anybody can. You can go to work with us at O'Reilly.com. There's a book proposal template there. You can fill that out. And the proposal template is essentially a business pitch. And that's what I tell people to try to think of it as. I find first time authors often are very passionate about their subject. So they tend to try to pitch it the way you would pitch something that you just I think sounds really fun. You know,
That's probably the
and
key thing. It needs to be engaging, right? And I felt like one of these before. Not only do you put your kind of book structure and your target audience in there, you also need to put evidence of the size of that audience and other competitors, right? Within that.
Ex- exactly. That's where I'm getting at. That it can't just be something you think is fun. You really need to think of it as like a little business pitch of if you were going on Shark Tank, you know, a talking water cooler might seem really neat, but you'll need to, you know, vet. Well,
Yeah.
are there people that want water coolers to talk? How many people? Show me numbers. Give me, you know, some concrete evidence that this is an idea. And I think that that actually works to help ideas. I think people get better books once they realize
Oh,
that,
yeah.
because then you can run it through that sieve of saying, okay, I had this idea for, you know, for cognitive architecture, and I really want to do that. But is anybody using that? Okay, these people are using that. That's the biggest audience. What are they using it for? And then you start putting those pieces in your book, and you actually come up with not just a book that sells better, but also one that appeals better, that has content and really engages people. So I think it's got more than just that business sense. But that's the biggest piece I always put in there if somebody's pitching an idea is
Hmm.
really think of it as a business pitch, not just hey, this is a neat idea. You know?
Yeah, yeah, and it's I find that step of the process really probably one of the most challenging, even in compared to writing a book, because that's where you have to kind of come up with the vision for the book and structure of the sort of chapters, what you're going to be sort of saying or the objective of each chapter. And to have that kind of structure down takes time. Like, you have to validate it against the market. But I feel once you have that in place, then that structure is critical to allow you to write the book with a kind of natural flow within that structure once it's defined. So I find it like a core part of that process, but almost the most challenging one. Sitting down and writing the book once the structure is done is far, far easier for me personally. Is that something that you see with other authors, or does it vary dramatically?
No, I see that pretty consistently. There, I would say, you know, there's 0.5% of authors that can just sit down and have no table of contents and stream of consciousness like run through things. It's extremely rare. I have met like maybe two in my entire career,
You probably
which
work with
again is like 20,
thousands.
yeah, exactly. In 25 years, I've seen like maybe two. So generally, no, that is the hardest step is getting that table of contents together. And that is always part of the pitch is we say, give us a table of contents. And first time authors are often nervous about that. They see it as aggravating hurdle often, I find where they'll go, oh, well, but I don't know what's in the book yet. I haven't written it. I need to sit down and write it, and then I can give you the table
Yeah.
of contents. And I'm glad you highlighted that. I'm not asking to make it harder for them. In the end, it's going to be easier
All
when
right.
they go, this piece goes here and that goes
Yeah.
there, because that just really helps before you're writing to understand where you're going. You know, then you've got this little roadmap, and it always updates. You know, I think people get nervous that, well, I put it in the proposal, so does it have to stay that table of contents? And I don't know any publisher. I've worked for, you know, many of them over the years, and none of them ask that you have it 100% that. It's just a roadmap. It's just a way to say, here's how I think we're going to go. And if, you know, you're, you know, halfway there and you decide to take a little detour on a scenic site or something, or you realize actually there's a shortcut to go this way, or, you know, there's construction here and we need to go around, that all happens every single time. I've never seen a table of contents in a proposal that is line for line perfectly what we have in the final product. But it does help give that roadmap so that you kind of know where you're going, and is helpful. I think that's what
Yeah,
I
no,
always see.
100% it is. And I think it's interesting what you say because largely you're dealing with technical people, black and white logical thinking. Writing a book's a creative process. So for a lot of these people, including myself, it's quite a different thing. You can be more flexible. It's more artistic and creative. So you should expect that table of contents to change. But it's like
Yeah.
technical people have set of requirements and they're building to a set of requirements and they're like, oh, well. if that's a moving goalpost, how do we kind of do that? So it's interesting that you put that out there. Anybody can get access to that template, as you mentioned. What was the URL again, Aaron? We'll put it in the
It's
show notes as well after the when we publish this.
absolutely, yes. So it's work with us at O'Reilly.com. So
Okay.
pretty straightforward. Yeah, and there's templates on there so you don't have to try to make this pitch, this book proposal blank. You have a guide through and can work right through that so that you put together something we're looking for, hopefully.
Got it.
And I should
Sorry,
Yeah,
go
and I
on.
should say that we also cover video courses and live trainings, online live trainings, all of that. There's proposals for those too. So if somebody in the audience is a little nervous to take on a book, I'll often, or if I'm nervous about a topic and I say I'm not convinced completely yet, we might do a video course or something, which is usually a little lighter lift to do like an hour course on this topic and say okay, data unity is your cool idea. I should highlight that doesn't exist. That's why I'm using it. Data unity
Yeah.
is your cool idea.
If anyone's out
And
there.
yeah, if anyone's out there and wants to trademark this, go for it. But I've never heard of that, or I see you spoke about it at a conference and that seemed well attended, but is that big enough? Then we might do like a video course really quick and get some feedback and say, okay, did
Hmm.
the audience respond to that? Did they like that? So that's on there as well that you could propose that too. So I thought I'd highlight that as well.
No, good to know. I was certainly wasn't aware of that. Um,
Yeah.
so that's how we start with the proposal, getting that in there. But what are the other steps in the process once that proposal's been approved by O'Reilly to get an actual book in your hand that's published in the public domain?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's pretty universal. I mean, O'Reilly. I'll walk you through specifically O'Reilly, but honestly, it's really similar at all the tech publishers. Different levels of publishing have different ways of doing this, but tech generally approaches it this way. So first, we have a proposal. That's usually like 2 to maybe 7 pages if it's really long, but they're really usually pretty concise. And we work through that proposal. They'll have a back and forth. The author and the acquisitions editor, me in this case, would have a back and forth to say, do we like this idea? And it should be a mutual like. It should be both sides saying, yes, this idea makes sense and it really works. You, as the author, feel like you can write it and you're invested in it. I feel like it's going to work well. There is a need for it, and it's going to be a strong title. Once we get that kind of settled between the two of us, then the acquisitions editor will pitch it. At O'Reilly, I will pitch it to my bosses and say, I like this idea. Sometimes we'll involve like a section of the team, so that there are a few editors covering data topic areas. So we have like a data analysis editor. We have one that's specifically focused more towards Gen AI and AI. So we may vet it through them as well and say, okay, what do you think? Hopefully, everybody at O'Reilly likes it after I like it. Sometimes they don't, and if they don't, then we kind of come back and say, okay, um, you know, as I brought it up to the team, here's some other questions they came up with. Maybe we can retool it. And every now and again it's a rejection, but hopefully you get through. And if you do, then we will sign an agreement. Yeah, those are generally like royalty based. So like for first time authors, royalties means that you get a percentage of sales or viewership. Viewerships become more important in recent years when now we don't always go to Barnes and Noble or a book retailer and
Hmm.
grab a book off the shelf, but you're reading it on Kindle or you're looking at the O'Reilly Learning platform, something like that. So that's what I mean by viewership is somebody just viewing it on something. So we'll pay that in royalties. And then generally in tech, deadlines are something like a year, which I highlight that a lot too. I worked for Springer Nature for a while, and like in academic books, you can have like 3 to 5 years to write a book, but in
Wow.
tech publishing, it tends to be about a year.
Yeah.
Depending on the topic. I've had everything from some that did take several years because it was a slow topic. It was something not evolving all that quickly, something a little evergreen. And then I've had books that were written in 24 hours.
Oh,
That's a
wow.
true story. Yeah, yeah. I have somewhere back here on the shelf an iPhone for Dummies. That was actually a Teach Yourself Visually iPhone that we did in 24 hours, which was an offshoot of the For Dummies team. But yeah, we did that. We had an intern in line for the iPhone, picked it up, and then rushed it back to a hotel room where the author was waiting. We locked the author in there, and he just wrote it
Brilliant.
literally overnight,
Wow.
and we turned it in the next day and had it going. So that's kind of that step. So we've got proposal, agreement. Then it goes into actual writing. And generally, the writing process at O'Reilly, you'll have what's called a development editor assigned. And they're a little more of what you would think of as an editor. I have editor in my title, but I don't really edit anything. I do want the material to be good, and I will like spot read things, and sometimes I'll read the whole thing, but generally in this part of the process, I'm more just kind of checking in and making
Hmm.
sure it's flowing well. But I'm not like that kind. But the development editor, they're the one reading every word on every page, really looking at it, pouring through it, making sure it all makes sense, rearranging things, making suggestions. And then almost every tech publisher, and definitely O'Reilly, will bring in tech reviewers as well. And those will usually be like third party people that are in the industry. So if it's, our mythical data Unity, we would find three other people talking about that and bring them in and have
Yeah.
them look through and make sure that everything we're saying makes sense, that if it's something more technical like Python or something, does this code compile? Does it run? Does this work?
Hmm.
Um, and we'll kind of work through that process for a good chunk of that year-long writing process. And generally, we go chapter by chapter. So we'll have the author submitting a chapter at a time. One thing that comes up with first-time authors almost always is that you don't have to write in order. Just like when you're shooting a movie, everybody knows that when you shoot a movie, you don't shoot the first scene and then the second. You just kind of all the scenes that are in that warehouse you shoot, and then all the scenes that are at the park you shoot. So a book is that same way. You can do chapter 3 if that makes the most sense to start with, and then chapter 6 and chapter 7, and usually chapter 1 is the last chapter to write, or near the end, because often it's going to tell you what all the other chapters
All
have in them,
right.
so it helps to
Okay.
go backwards and say,
Yeah.
all right, here's what's in those chapters. So yeah, then we'll kind of work through that chapter by chapter, having things turned in, get edited, reviewed. And then at the back end of that, sometimes it's iterative. Sometimes we'll get a chunk of things in and then do it. We'll have a review cycle where the author works through, make sure that all the comments, the suggestions, the edits really make sense, because like the development editor is not going to be somebody that is working in the field. They're somebody who works for
Hmm.
O'Reilly full time doing editing. So they're usually familiar with our topics because they're reading O'Reilly books all day. They're actually very technical people in their own right. But they may break things. They may not understand what was going on with this JSON thing here, or that SQL
Yeah.
query,
Yeah.
and they might break things. So we have you review through, make sure the author reviews through, make sure everything's good, and then we send it into production, and it goes into a staff that lays it out on pages. I actually don't know off the top of my head if O'Reilly still uses InDesign, but InDesign was kind of an industry standard for a long time. But pulling things in, making a really nice layout. O'Reilly will redraw all the graphs, all the pictures, everything that
Yeah.
is submitted by the author. Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
nice,
So
I like that. That's because drawing diagram takes a lot of time from an author's perspective. So I just rough them up now. Now I'm familiar with the process. I just put a rough one in there, knowing that it's going to be redrawn. And I do see a lot of value in that because it's in a common style to every other O'Reilly publication you see out there. And that they can make it look nice and neat, and you don't need to worry about the time. You just got to convey your visual idea on a page, and that's good enough.
Absolutely, yeah, and it is a little unique to O'Reilly. A lot of
Oh,
other publishers
okay.
don't do that. They'll ask the author to submit a final thing. But O'Reilly, for the reason you named there, we like all our books to be consistent and have a certain quality level and look. So we like to redraw them so that it all has that O'Reilly polish to it. And yeah, and I think it is a boon to the author too, because like
Massive.
you said, you can, yeah, you can just draw, you can literally do a back a napkin sketch if you
Yeah.
wanted to and take a picture and send it to us. And you as the author get to review those once we've drawn them, right? So you can say, okay, you did make it right at the end. The classic example that always springs to my head is Spinal Tap, the
Yeah.
movie from the 80s. The guitarist wants Stonehenge on stage, but he draws it on the back of a napkin and puts 3 foot tall instead of 30 foot tall. And so these little tiny Stonehenges. So you always get to check and make sure that that it's
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
sorry,
yeah, go
continue.
ahead.
I interrupted. Just we're getting towards the end of that publishing process now. So you kind of redrawn the
Yeah,
diagrams, you've packaged up that kind of finished product. I remember you kind of, as an author, you get to review that kind of finished sort of prototype, if you like, right before it goes into print. And I think that's the point that we're up to now, Aaron, on this process.
we are. Yes, yeah. I talk through this so many times in a day. This is actually my third time today explaining this process.
Wow.
So I don't forget where because I do this a lot. So yes, that's where we are in this process. So once we have it on those pages and everything redrawn, and you've checked it and made sure it didn't break and it looks good, then it goes out. Then we publish it. So O'Reilly publishes on the O'Reilly Learning platform. Anybody can go out there. That's learning.o'reilly.com, and sign up for a 10-day free trial if you want to look around. And every O'Reilly book's on there, as well as our video courses. We just started a new AI Academy, all kinds of really cool stuff on
Oh,
there to
wow.
check out. Yeah, yeah. So that's worth checking out. And then, of course, we publish to Amazon is obviously a worldwide major book retailer, but quite a few others as well. Pretty much everywhere in the English speaking world for the first wave when the first version of the book comes out. Um, and then we work to market it. Then we kind of, all kind of work together. I'll post on social medias about things. The author generally is posting about things. We don't do book signings or things like that as part of like the marketing effort organically. I think sometimes first time authors think they're going to get, an all expense paid, globe trotting trip around the world. We don't tend to do that. But if, you're speaking at a conference already or something, we're more than happy to work with authors to try to, get books there and help them organize
Oh, that's good.
signings. Or if we're presenting at a conference, I'll usually, if we have a booth, I'll usually kind of sweep through and see who of our authors are going to be there and invite them to come to the booth and maybe do a signing, or
Oh, that's good.
occasionally we'll do like a demo. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So
Nice
so
little
we kind of all
promise.
work together on that. Yeah, yeah. And then that's kind of the end of the book's life cycle once we've done all that and sales and marketing and pushed it out there and hopefully it's a hit.
Yeah, well, that's the
And
idea, right? That's the idea.
yeah,
And
yeah. And then if it is, we repeat the process.
yeah, just do it all over again from scratch.
Yeah,
And I guess look, we're coming up against time, Aaron, and my
sure.
final kind of question is really just advice to again first time authors maybe out there who are watching this and have that idea to write a book. It'd be great to understand. I mean, you've got a wealth of experience, so long in the industry. You must have seen it all, no doubt.
Yes,
I would love to just to get, an idea of those top two, top three common challenges new authors face. But also,
sure.
one thing that's must have changed dramatically as well, which must kind of come into the consciousness of new authors when they're looking to publish a book, is self-publishing route, with Amazon,
Mm.
Kindle. And what I think it'd be great is maybe just to bring these two kind of questions together is what challenges do new authors face? And how would you make it, like, how would you lay it out in terms of making a decision for new authors between going self-publishing versus the support somebody like O'Reilly can give a new author?
Yeah, no, that's a classic question. I get that one pretty regularly too. So, a lot of the challenges authors face, I think some are fairly obvious of trying to self-edit. trying to read your own writing and say, does this make sense? What am I missing here? Because editing isn't just typos; it's also understanding if the flow and of the narrative really makes sense. If getting from point A to point Z really flows, or are we getting lost along the way? And that's somewhere that having somebody other than you really work through it is key, I think. So even if you're very, very confident that you never make typos, or you think you'll feed it to, whatever Grammarly or something and have that fixed, it still really helps to have quality editors reading through it, and really people that like me that have been around for a good while to really go through and say, here's what makes sense, here's what doesn't. It also really helps to have cheerleaders. So O'Reilly then kind of become your cheerleaders. Um, Sometimes we're drill sergeants instead of cheerleaders, but but hopefully we're cheerleaders and pushing you on to say, okay, we know you hit this stumbling block, but you can do it. We can get you through it. We will figure this out, and we can help you troubleshoot. Which is something that when you're on your own, you might not have as much help with, because we can say, okay, you've hit that, but we've seen this kind of stumbling block, or we've been reading the book so far. We understand. And then if you do self-publish, you don't have to pitch the book. And we, jumping all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, I would at least make a pitch for the book, even if you're self-publishing, to get that idea vetted first. Vet it yourself, if nothing else, because that's something we're going to continuously do with the tech reviewers, with the editors, with everybody. We're going to keep vetting that idea, keep our fingers on the pulse of the market, make sure we know, okay, what you said you were doing, what we are doing, what needs to be done, all that's getting done. So those are like big areas that I feel like authors run into as challenges, and that not self-publishing but going through a traditional publisher can really help be alleviated. And O'Reilly never charges for any of our services, so that's just a really quick highlight. I think most people know that, but this isn't something where you're paying us to do all this. Like
Hmm.
we're here to help you. Obviously, we're getting money out of the sales of the book and everything, but we aren't like a vanity press or something. So we
Sure.
really challenge you and work with you and try to make sure that everything comes out just right. We're self-publishing, you're not going to get that. That said, there I don't undersell self-publishing. There are times that it could be great. If you really, really, really feel like you have your idea and this is going to hit, and generally, the way to know is to have already done it, right? So there are people that are just nonstop at conferences, nonstop speaking on this, nonstop posting on Medium about it, and maybe they could get away with self-publishing. They've already got this audience, and they're selling it at the conferences. They're and doing all that. But unless you already have all that in, then I think having a traditional publisher still has a really big advantage. Of course, I work for one, but but I've stayed in this industry all this time because I do feel like I get to elevate voices and help people that become awesome rock stars in the tech community. And I feel like that because I think traditional publishing can help make that happen.
Yeah, and I think some great points there. In from my experience, I would say beginning in new author, it's quite a daunting process to embark on the self-publishing journey because it's not just writing a book. It's about the packaging. It's about the cover design. It's about the who's going to edit it, like you say, independently of yourself. Um, who's going to market it? And there's a lot more than just writing the book. And so I've done both now, and where I benefited was to do my first book with a publisher, and where you've really just got to focus on, drafting those chapters, following a structure, and hitting the timelines predominantly.
Yeah.
Everything else, that team around you, as you mentioned and touched on some of the points, really help with providing the feedback, the input, the guidance, etc. They'll take care of the editing and the packaging of the book and get in and out there, right? So, but once you've learned, the 50, 60%, which is probably the writing element, I think there's quite a
Right.
lot to do. You then go, well, if I've got a really strong idea and you're confident in that, and what actually happened with myself is I pitched a book to a publisher, so I had that structure there. We didn't necessarily come to an agreement to move forward on that. So I thought, well, I've got the structure, got the idea. I know there's a market from what I've seen in terms of my audience. I'm going to self-publish it myself, and I'm going to learn the bits I couldn't do last time. And I guess
Sure.
that approach worked quite well, but what it does make you appreciate is when you're working with a publisher like O'Reilly, the value add that you get as part of that process of that team around you doing the diagrams, doing the, the making sure the flow is right. Huge value in that because when you read the finished product, you're like, wow, this reads really well, like far better than I could have ever done on my own, and it doesn't even sound like it
Right.
anymore. You to a point. So there's real
Yeah.
value in that, and I think that rather than coming from you just on your own from O'Reilly, it's really good for me to be able to say it from an independent standpoint as well and kind of validate some of the aspects that you said because there's real value there.
Absolutely, yeah, and one challenge and question that always comes up with new authors is how long will this take me? And I often compare it to night school. Like, imagine you want to get a certificate in something, product management. Let's say you want to get a product management certificate, so you take a 9-month course that leads you from zero to hero in that, and at the end, you've probably got a product that you've built that the course led you through. You've had all this hand holding, all this growth. And so then that also ties back to what we're talking about right here. You had people helping you, and you had people putting it together. And maybe when you're done with that, you get a certificate. Now you have a stamp that says product school or whichever institute says you have this. You are a product manager. That's what like going with a traditional publisher is like. It takes that kind of time. And then at the end, you get that stamp that says you are an O'Reilly author. You put in the time, you put in the effort. We vetted that idea. We checked what you worked on, and we said, yes, this person knows what they're doing. So there is
Absolutely.
that huge value add to that. And then yeah, afterwards, if you want to branch out on your own a little, go for it. I am a self-published author myself. I've self-published 4 books, so I've been through that process too, and know how that works out too. So I'm not just talking purely from the publisher side of things. I've been down that route myself.
That's great to know. Make sure you look up Aaron Black on Amazon.
Yeah,
You find your books.
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, leave good
um,
reviews.
yeah, absolutely. That's the only criteria that you need to
Yeah,
remember.
yeah.
So, listen,
Uh,
Aaron, we're at time now. I just want to say thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your partnership as well for myself personally. It's been a great experience working for Riley on both the times I've done it, including the current one that we're currently working on a project together. And we covered a lot of ground there. I hope people who are watching this find it really useful. We'll put the link in the show notes to the work with us URL to get an idea and a sense of what that template looks like to fill out. But in the meantime, Aaron, thanks so much for your time and thanks for going through all of that process. I think it's going to be really valuable.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, and I'm glad to help.